In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you exactly what I'm looking for when I'm picking out productive locations to target smallmouth bass during the fall. Let's dive into this thing. In this video, I really want to dive deep and share with you specific locations and things that you guys should be looking for on your body's of water to locate smallmouth bass. This is not going to be surface level content. We're going to really dive deep, and I'm going to expose some of my favorite areas that I'm looking for when I look at a lake map or when I get out to a body of water that help me locate fish quickly. And especially during the fall when these fish are in constant transition, I'm going to really dive into why I'm looking at these areas, what these areas have that are going to help position fish, and how you guys can take this information and apply it to your lakes. Now, if you guys don't know who I am, my name is Benjamin Nowak, and this channel is dedicated to giving you guys tips, taking you guys along for my fishing trips, and just experiencing time on the water with me. So if you guys enjoy that style of content, I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button down below. Let's grow this community. So hit that subscribe button if you're not already. Without further ado, let's dive into this thing. Now, when I get out to a lake in the fall, whether it's a new lake or my home body of water, there's really three specific areas that I'm going to have the most confidence in locating smallmouth. Now, this is glacial lakes, Great Lakes, inland bodies of water, reservoirs. Basically, no matter where I'm going during the fall, this is what I'm looking for, these three key areas to locate smallmouth bass. My number one area that I'm going to be targeting smallmouth during the fall is on sloping flats. And what I mean by a sloping flat is an area where you have really tight contour lines that then start to spread out and become more flatter or tapering. Now, this is all relative. So on your body of water, it could be 5 to 10 foot, but up here in Michigan, we have these glacial bodies of water, which are extremely deep, and it could be anywhere from 35 to 25 foot of water are these sloping flats. So it depends on your body of water, but you're really looking for these areas where those tight contour lines start to spread out and form a basin or a flat area on your body of water. Now, typically when I'm looking at these sloping flats, I'm really looking at the start and the end or either end of that sloping flat. This is the area where most of your deposits are going to be sitting, whether that's from a river channel that pushes against that or a glacial body of water that has scraped out the bottom. A lot of those major deposits are going to be where those flats start to form. So a lot of times when you're looking for these flats, you can identify them by looking for points and where that point starts to come back into maybe a bowl or a basin or a bay. Or you can also find these just along, a straight flat that tends to have a little bit shallower portion. And in my opinion, the reason that these sloping flats tend to hold fish not only is because of that debris that is deposited there, but it gives these fish an opportunity to gradually move up into that shallower water and feed. You also have, right at the start of that sloping flat, that hard break where these fish, if that water does change quickly, can move up and down very fast. So these sloping flats really have a lot of key features that are going to help hold fish. Now, not only are you looking at the start and the end of that sloping flat, but you can also find sweet spots along that flat that will hold fish. Obviously, you can look for isolated areas with cover, so you can take your side scan or your forward-facing sonar and scan down these flats and find isolated boulders, isolated pieces of wood, isolated grass, which will hold fish. But in my opinion, some of the most productive locations on these flats are actually changes in the bottom contour, changes in the structure that you're fishing. That could be small points, small turns in that flat, just these areas where the bottom is a little bit different. And a lot of times what that indicates is that there's a bottom transition there, and a lot of times these very minute bottom transitions will hold a lot of fish. One of my favorite bites to get on in the fall is actually on a small lake around here. You can go up to and start to graph for these hard spots on bottom. And you'll literally be graphing down this long flat, and you'll start to notice a bright spot on your side scan. What that is a hard spot on bottom where these fish will actually set up. And I don't necessarily know what causes it. I don't know if it's from the wind or from the way that the lake was formed with the glaciers, but that hard spot tends to hold bait, which then tends to hold bass. And so by just locating these small composition changes or these small changes along that flat, you can find some really productive locations. So spot number one is looking at those sloping flats on your lake where these fish can kind of slowly move up into that shallower water, but still have quick shallow water access if needed. Spot number two for me is going to be a current push. Especially in the fall, we've already talked about in previous videos how important current and wind is, but these smallmouth are really, really push oriented. And what I mean by that is the push is where that current is blowing into or pushing into an area. So wind blown banks or wind blown pieces of cover and structure are where these fish are going to want to sit. And as opposed to largemouth, which will tend to sit on the backside of that current push, these smallmouth tend to sit on the front side of it. So let's say your wind is blowing out of the north and you have a hump that wind is blowing into. These fish are actually going to want to sit on the forward side of that hump where that current is flowing across. Typically, you might catch a couple on the back side of that hump. You might catch one or two, but they tend to scatter out. Your big congregation of fish is going to be on the area that the current is pushing into hardest. Now, there is theory that that push actually creates a pillow. It creates an area where, like a back eddy at the front of that push, that essentially just cycles the bait, which is why those fish sit there. But to me, it is just really about the aggressive nature of smallmouth that wants to be in the action. They want to be there feeding actively and aggressively, and that's why you find the biggest pods of fish on the push. Whereas on the backside, you tend to have more slack current area where that smallmouth can really start to roam, and it doesn't position those fish quite as well. So when you target an area, look for the current push or look for areas that are being blown into by the wind. Another big thing that a lot of people don't think about is that wind and wave current is not only prevalent in shallow water. I've seen this many, many times in deep water situations where I'll be fishing a deep reef in 25 to 27 foot of water, not really thinking about the way that the current is flowing into it or the wind is pushing into that location, but there's a ton of current that is driven by that wind and those waves that's going to set up fish there, especially when it's being wind blown. So this is not only a shallow water thing to consider, it's also a deep water approach as well. And then tip number 3 is looking for vertical pieces of cover and structure. Now what I mean by vertical pieces is literal up and down pieces of cover and structure. It could be wood, could be boulders, could be cables from a buoy. For some reason during the fall, when these fish are really actively, aggressively feeding, they will get on vertical pieces of cover a lot more effectively than they will horizontal pieces of cover and structure. So what I mean by that is they don't tend to get on logs laying down or big grass patches or these pieces of cover that are laying on bottom quite as effectively as they do isolated pieces of vertical cover and structure, particularly hard pieces of cover and structure. What it is about this, I'm not entirely sure, but I've seen it time and time again, and enough to know that when I'm looking for highly productive locations this time of year, I'm looking for vertical areas. Now, up here in Michigan, we don't have a ton of bluffs, but what we do have are those areas where you have really steep drops and then shallow water access really quickly. And this is a great time of year, especially in the fall, when you can get up on those areas that the current and wind is pushing into, going back to point 2, and fishing those underwater steep drops as if they're a bluff. A lot of times these smallmouth, they want super quick access to shallow water, and they want to be able to feed up and down in the column really quickly, especially as our water temps change quickly. So that vertical cover is going to allow them to do that really effectively. We also have a ton of bodies of water where you have these man-made pieces of cover, which I call fish poles. They're literal giant poles in the water, and for some reason during the fall months, these bass really like to relate to those. I don't know if it's the temperature of the water that these fish like to relate to that because they can just kind of set up behind it, come up and aggressively feed, or if it's just the fact that they are more aggressive this time of year, that they like to be on just a single piece of cover and feed there. But this is what I found to be a really productive pattern, especially at locating bigger than average fish. Now, obviously, I don't think you're going to find massive schools on these vertical pieces of cover, but it is a great opportunity to find some of the biggest fish of your life. There was a video I posted last fall. I believe it was called Possibly the Easiest Smallmouth Pattern During the Fall. And I went out and we were fishing a cable off of a buoy, and I ended up catching a 568. Threw a swim bait past this buoy, was winding it real slow. Now, I did have forward-facing sonar, and I saw this fish come out of the buoy and immediately smoked my swim bait, and it was our biggest fish of the trip. 568 off of a vertical cable that couldn't have been any wider than maybe a 6-inch to 12-inch diameter cable. And that just goes to show you how much these fish like to relate to these vertical pieces of cover and structure in the fall. So those are my 3 main areas that I'm looking for these fish. You have your slopes and your pushes with isolated pieces of cover or isolated bottom transitions and composition changes. You have areas where current is pushing into your area that are going to set fish up more predictably and on a more regular basis. And then you have those vertical pieces of hard cover and structure where fish, and especially big fish, like to hang out. Now, I know this video was a little bit different. I try to go a little bit deeper and give you guys some areas where you guys can sit down and look at a lake map and say, okay, well, there's a sloping flat like Ben said, or maybe there's an area where current is going to be blowing into it because I know the forecast says it's going to be blowing out of the north. I hope that this will give you guys some insight into your next or upcoming fishing trips that will allow you to have success on the water. I have a concept that I want to talk to you guys about and see if you guys are interested in me making this video, but it's essentially talking about bite windows for smallmouth. Now, I have my own theory on this, and then there's also some science to back it up, so it would take a little bit more to put together than a simple talking head video, but I'd like to know if you guys would like to hear my theory on bite windows in the fall, because I do believe, especially in colder water times of year, bite windows are more and more critically important. So let me know down in the comment section down below. Now, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, go down there, give it a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button right there. And if you want to see some more fall style videos, click this video to watch me hammer on some fish. If you guys aren't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. It'll let you know when I post more videos just like this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Take care, tight lines. God bless. Pursue passion.